Hello there, everyone. Thank you for joining me this evening. My name is Sarah Huffman, and I'm the Art Rental and Sales Associate here at the Art Gallery of Alberta. We welcome you to our Meet the Artist series, a part of AGAlive, presented by EPCOR's Heart and Soul Fund. Here at the gallery, we embrace the teachings of Tatewa, a Cree phrase meaning welcome, there is room. In our house, even the virtual one, everyone is welcome. I'm delighted to be your host for this hour. Joining me today is artist Sydney Lancaster. Before we dive into the subject, hi, Sydney.
Hi, Sarah. Hello, everybody.
Good to see you and your smiling face.
Thank you.
So I'd like to highlight for you folks that this is an interactive event and we would love to hear from you throughout. So feel free to reach out through the chat function and we will answer any questions that come up. And before we get started, I'm going to read Sydney's bio for everyone. So Sydney is an Edmonton-based multi-disciplinary artist and writer. Her work has been presented in solo and group exhibitions in public, artist-run, and commercial galleries in Alberta, British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, and Newfoundland. Lost my spot. There we go. Lancaster has held residencies at Harcourt House, Alberta, Gross Moor National Park, Red Rabbit, Quarters Art Society, Ruth Karst Center for Dance, as well as Main and Station. She's received support for her work from the Edmonton Arts Council, Edmonton Heritage Council, Alberta Foundation for the Arts, and the Canada Council. Her practice considers the intersection of place, objects, memory, and time, and includes site-specific installation and sculpture, photography, video, and audio works, printmaking, and mixed media found object assemblage. Sydney has worked in artist-run centers and has been an advocate, volunteer, and board member for various organizations supporting human/LGBTQS rights, housing and homeless advocacy, and artist rights over the last 33 years, including past advocacy director and past president of the Visual Arts Alberta, CARFAC. So Sydney is a wonderful, busy artist. That was definitely a mouthful of a bio, and I'm so excited to dive into all of these things that you wonderfully do, Sydney. And it is such an honor for me to have this conversation with you and continue to get to know you. I've had a couple of interactions with you with Art Rental and Sales, and I'm so excited to get to know more about your practice.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Sarah. It's a lovely opportunity, and thank you very much to the AGA for inviting me to share a little bit about my work and all the crazy things I do. So it's lovely. Thanks.
Absolutely. So where do you want to get started? Do you want to chat about, how about when did you know you were going to be an artist?
Oh, boy. Okay, well, I think I've always wanted to be an artist. And it was a long and winding road to get here. For a variety of reasons, but I was finally able to pretty much dedicate myself to full-time practice about 15 years ago. Right. And I really haven't looked back since then, and I'm very, very grateful for that opportunity. It took a long time to get to this place. My mother was an artist. She was a painter and a potter, and my dad was a potter as well, but he was a broadcast journalist. And so my initial training was actually in literature.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so I took a degree in English at the University of Alberta. And I had actually started graduate work there as well, an MA in English, and then sort of went, it's not where I want to be.
Yeah.
And so did a bunch of other things for a while, and finally was in a position where I could take the dive into making work. So yeah.
Absolutely. That is so wonderful. And when you started your own practice and being able to go into more full-time work, where did you begin?
I took a lot of cues actually initially from the literature and from the critical theory that I had been reading at the university. So I've always been really interested in ideas of memory and storytelling, the way we tell stories about ourselves.
Right.
So ideas of identity, really.
Yeah.
And how we situate ourselves in places and in times, and how we gather things to ourselves that are important to us for one reason or another, different objects and that kind of thing. So I started very early. My very early work was actually a lot of found object assemblage.
Yeah, neat.
So wall-based, but quite 3D and quite sculptural.
Yeah.
And so that's where I sort of got into the idea of reassembling narratives and going, where are the gaps? Where are the ways in? So that's how that started. And then as I worked that way for a few years, the work started getting bigger and coming off the wall more and coming off the wall more and coming off the wall more. And I realized that what I needed to do was work larger, work in space, really work in space. And so that's when I started to turn my attention to building things in the landscape. And that opened up a whole new way of working for me.
Yeah.
And a very different way to bring threads together that I was interested in. There's a memory in the land. There's a memory in landscape. There's a different sense of time that you can embrace when you work out in the land. And it's allowed me to bring in threads of, scientific research and, geology, and all kinds of things come into play when you're working in the landscape. But then the problem comes in, how do you take something that you've built in the landscape and bring it to the people? Because making work is about having a conversation. It's about exploring ideas together. Even if you're at one remove and it's somebody who's seeing your work in a gallery somewhere far away from where you are at that moment, it's still about engaging on a very intimate level in a way, because making art, I mean, if I could say everything that I wanted to say in words, I would just write. But the beautiful thing about making visual art is that I can find ways to say things that I can't find the words for. And so the neatest experience has been people being around when people respond to the work that I have on exhibition, in a show or something, and go, oh, so this makes me think of, or I remember when, or whatever, and immediately there's a deep connection to a humanness that we all share. So that's I mean, really sort of the impetus behind the way I work now.
Absolutely. Wonderfully said.
Oh, thank you.
That was awesome. And sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say, and now with the restrictions that we are currently with and everything like that, are you seeing any challenges in your work with that human connection currently, and how are you kind of navigating that as an artist?
Well, it's been complicated, for sure. I've been very fortunate in that the work that the project that I'm working on right now is in a fairly remote rural area. Okay. And so when I've had the opportunity to go out there and work, I can work alone, and I can work even if other people are around on the land at that time. Right. We can all be very, very well distanced. So that's been great. Yeah. Obviously, traveling to other parts of the country, which is something that I've been doing for several years now for other projects, is not so easy to do right now. So this year has been very much hunker down and work more locally.
Yeah, you must have to kind of separate each individual piece to say, I'll do this at this time, I'll do this at this time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you just, I mean, artists are pretty adaptable folks. So you just figure out what you can do and do the best you can. But I was very fortunate this year. I was able to receive Creators Reserve Grant from the Edmonton Arts Council, which was fantastic. It was such a relief to have a little bit of funding when everything shut down, because everything I had planned for the year disappeared. Yeah, it disappeared as soon as the first lockdown came in the spring. So that was a loss of opportunities and income. So that grant was a very, very welcome thing. But it allowed me to take a deep dive into this project that has been sort of on the back burner, and I've been digging into it and then working on other things and digging into it again and working on other things. So it was a good opportunity. Fortunately, I was able to mount an exhibition this fall at Snap Gallery, which I didn't think was, I mean, for a time we were going, is this even going to happen? How are we going to make this work? And we were able to do it. We were able to get the work up on the walls. We were able to do a socially distanced, limited number of people in the gallery at a time opening, which I attended virtually on Zoom, and my collaborator Scott Smallwood also attended virtually on Zoom. So we were carried around on an iPad so we could say hi to people. But it was wonderful to actually be able to put work on the walls, exhibit, and have people engage with the work in person. So I feel I'm very grateful for all of those opportunities. It's been a tremendously difficult year for everybody. And I think the organizations like SNAP, like the AGA, the other artist funds in the country, the other museums and galleries and project spaces in the country have all stepped up tremendously to do whatever they can to support artists and to support the ongoing engagement with artwork, because it's stuff that sustains us. It really does, especially now. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Just looking in the chat here, we have Sheila and Anna. Hello, Sheila and Anna. Thank you very much.
Hello, Sheila. Hello, Anna. Lovely to have you join us. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Well, and that just plays into that human connection too. And
absolutely,
such a joy to have folks come in and join in the conversation and get to ask you questions. And so I'm very much looking forward to the rest of this event.
Absolutely. So I guess, maybe we should share some pictures and look at some stuff.
Right.
What I thought I would start with, just by way of introduction to my work, was just take everybody through a few recent projects, and just to give you a sense of how my process works and how I bring things from the landscape to the gallery. I think about the way I do that as sort of a process of translation. As I said, I can't replicate what I find or make in the natural environment in a gallery setting. It's an artificial setting. And obviously often at a distance from where I'm working. So my efforts tend to be focused on conveying both the as an artist. So it's about combining those sort of two sources of understanding. And it's really my hope that I can create a space for others, emotional space, mental space, psychological space, for people to think and reflect about what's in the work, and hopefully learn something about their own understanding of their world and the place in their place in it. So we could go to the first slide.
Fantastic.
So this goes back a few years. This is a gallery view of an exhibition called 21st Century Nesting Practices that I had at the McMullen Gallery in Edmonton in 2018. Mm-hmm. And this was the last show for this work. I don't think I'll be showing it again. Mm-hmm. It was the culmination of several years work. This whole body of work started in 2012 when I was artist in residence at Harcourt House Center here in Edmonton for the year, which was a wonderful opportunity to take a huge deep dive into making work. It was really great. And it's interesting working on projects over a period of time because they teach you so much. I learned so much about myself and about why I make art and how I make art in developing this work. I definitely started in one emotional space and ended up in another.
Right.
And this is probably the most personal body of work that I have made so far. I mean, they're all very personal to me, but this was a very big heart project for me, because it came out of grieving the loss of both my parents, and my dad had passed away a number of years earlier. He died in 1991. But I was in a place, I had a baby at the time, and I was in grad school, and I didn't have the opportunity to grieve. And then my mom passed in 2004. And at that time, I was immersed in a whole bunch of other things and other jobs, and I was in a new relationship where I became a step parent to 3 amazing humans. And I have a daughter of my own as well. So it was that, bring the blended family together and make all of that stuff work. So it was a very busy, crazy, wonderful time. But again, I wasn't able to grieve at that moment in time, or not fully. So I started making this work. I had done a lot of writing, and it just wasn't getting where it needed to go. Right. So that's where this project started. It started in looking at the nest as a phenomenological object, right? It's there's this association with the nest, and we talk about nesting, right? I'm going to go home and nest, and it's something very safe and cozy and warm and all of those things. But what if your nest isn't safe? What if your nest isn't that warm place? What if it's problematic? What if there's loss involved? What if all of that stuff has to happen? So the work started in that place. But by the time I brought it to the McMullen in 2018, I had kept on going into the work, and I had re-exhibited portions of the project in 2015 and 2016 at the Art Gallery St. Albert and at Gallery 501 in Sherwood Park. So by the time I brought it to the McMullen, I was in a different place. And what I could offer then, the McMullen Gallery is in the University of Alberta Hospital. And it's a wonderful place for both the staff and the patients at the hospital to come and just spend time. So what I wanted to offer in that last exhibition was a shift to a positive place, a place where you could rest, where you could find a nest and just be for a little while, and just put everything aside for a little while and stop. And from what I gather from the responses to the exhibition at the McMullen, I was fairly successful. I heard stories about people coming in to the gallery and lying on the floor underneath the nest.
Oh, wow.
Where you can see all the patterns.
Yeah.
And just being there for a while.
Yeah.
And that was just the most remarkable thing for me. It was, I felt so grateful to be able to do what I do to make that possible for somebody. Yeah. So it was a nice, that was a really nice moment. We could go to the next slide.
Okay, for sure.
So these are two pieces from that body of work. Occupied Nest and Empty Nest. Not terribly imaginative titles, but they do get the point across. These are photographs. They're gel transfer printed images. They're both 4 feet by 4 feet. So it's this big scale that allows you to kind of dive into this very intimate space. So that was sort of some of the play that I was working with in this body of work. We can go to the next one. This is another piece, a major piece that came out of this project. This is a shot from Gallery 501 in Sherwood Park when it was installed. There are 360 images of nests. Most of them are magpie nests because that's what happens in Edmonton.
Yep.
And I spent a year and a half photographing magpie nests, walking around all times of year, a lot in the winter, because of course that's when they're best exposed.
Right.
And you can see those structures and see that get down to the essential nature of what a nest is, that space that holds a lot of potential. So there's 360 of those images, one for every degree in a circle.
Right.
So if you sit in the middle of a nest, you can look all the way around. Right. So it was about how do you look in and how do you look out simultaneously, and how does what you carry in the world, in yourself, impact how you see, and how does that color your perception, and when do we just see, and when do we look but not see? You know, the interesting thing about those magpie nests, I never found two that were the same size. I never found two that were the same shape. I never found two that were in exactly the same position in a tree, even if the tree was almost identical.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? We go through so much of our lives looking but not seeing. And it's like, oh, a nest. Oh, another nest. Oh, another nest. But if you pay attention, it's the small things that teach you so much about what it is to live in the world and how much beauty there can be. So that was all floating around in all of that work too.
Absolutely. Do you know how long it took? You said about a year and a half to take all of these these photos. Wow.
Yeah, at least. I think no, actually, you know what? Longer. I'm lying. I just made myself a liar. I started in 2012. And then I finally finished the 360. I selected and edited and printed the last image in 2015.
Wow.
3 years. Yeah, 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Altogether, just the shooting was probably half that time.
Right.
Yeah.
And then did you know what exactly you wanted to come out of taking those photos when you were taking them? Did you have that end goal of this piece, or were you kind of going, I'll take one here and there and see where it goes?
I think it started initially as just an observational process. You know, I knew I was working with the nest as a metaphor. I knew I wanted to work with that symbolism and with the idea there's what prompted the use of the nest for this project as an image was rereading an essay by Gaston Bachelard. He has this really lovely book. I recommend it to everybody, called The Poetics of Space. And in it, there's an essay on nests, and he talks about how humans respond to seeing a nest in the back garden, seeing birds' nests, that kind of thing. But I wanted to problematize and trouble what he was saying, because he was taking an approach that assumed a universality of experience. And I thought that was a very dangerous place to go. It's not, it doesn't work that way. And assuming that people are going to respond in a universally positive way to ideas of home can get us into a lot of trouble, because there are lots of folks who don't have that positive experience. So I just wanted to work that through. So that's where the process of just going out and observing and looking began. And then as I kept on taking photographs, I recognized that the differentiation that I made between looking and seeing, really seeing. And then I thought, okay, so where does that put me in relation to the nest that I'm talking about? And that's where the idea of being able to go look at the full circle came to be. So that long sort of traveling journey. It's always a discovery.
Absolutely. It's not one linear line to get you from point A to point B. And sometimes it is, and that's great. But sometimes it's not, and that's great too.
I don't think I've had a linear journey in anything I've ever done. And that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. That's what makes it interesting, right?
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So this is, I just wanted to show you guys this piece. This is also from 21st Century Nesting Practices. And this was a bit of this was a really interesting piece to work on for me, because it was bringing together a lot of those threads into one piece. There are gel transfer prints of nests printed on mylar on these, and also on transparent silk organza in the center panel. They're very human scaled, right? They're 2 feet wide by 84 inches tall. And in the gallery, you could walk between them. So there was this sort of moving between the trees idea in the work. But in addition to the nest images, I actually wove into the front and back panels old family photographs, my parents when they were much younger, baby photographs of me, baby photographs of my dad, that kind of thing. So it was this idea of really reweaving and weaving all of the threads of who we each were as individuals together. And the back panel also contains some poetry that I wrote, and that's printed on both sides of the panel. So you see one half of the story on one side of the panel and the other half of the story on the other. It's transparent enough, it's mylar, so you can see the words that are printed backwards, but they're hard to make out. So you have half the story, and then you have the other half of the story. So all of those, without belaboring the metaphor and the cliche, the two sides of a coin.
Right.
But those were very personal memories. One from my childhood when I was about 4 and I found a robin's egg. I took it to my mom. It's like, oh, can we save it? Can we save it? Can we have a baby robin for a pet? And it was so fragile. It was so fragile. It broke in my hands. I sort of rolled it into my mom's hands actually, and it cracked. And I was just like, I was devastated. I was so crushed, So that, that was a way of speaking to that loss and all of the losses that were in that work, in the whole body of work. The other part of the story was having my own daughter, and she was about 5, I guess, maybe 4 or 5, so not much older than I was when that happened when I was a kid. And a baby robin had fallen out of a tree in our backyard. And we managed to catch it, scoop it up. We had a dog that wanted to eat it, and we managed to scoop it up before the dog got to it. And we actually brought it inside and got a cage and all of that, and raised the bird and released it.
Oh.
So that was my releasing of all of the stuff, and just going, yeah, I'm at peace with this now.
Yeah.
So yeah, so very personal work, but things that people, without having the backstory, you can still dive inside it and hopefully take something away from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So this was a fun project. This was amazing. What a great opportunity this was. These are shots of a very large installation that I did.
I can attest to that. It was very large.
This is an installation called Boundary Time Surface, and it was built in Grossmore National Park in 2014 at a place called Greenpoint, which is really, as you can see from the photographs, really beautiful. Yeah. I was fortunate enough to have been given a residency at Grossmore National Park. They have a program called Art in the Park that is co-sponsored by Parks Canada and the Rooms Gallery in St. John's, Newfoundland. And St. John's receives, the Rooms receives funding to support the artist in the program, and through the Canada Council, which is where my Canada Council funding that you mentioned came from. Yeah. And Parks Canada provides the artist in residence with a place to live in a studio space. Wow. So it was a fantastic opportunity. Yeah, and I was out there for 5 weeks doing research and building this project. And this was an opportunity for me to work collaboratively with my partner, who is a geologist and has worked and done research on the west coast of Newfoundland, where Grossmore is located, and all up and down that coast. So it was a very, very interesting time and an interesting way of approaching work, because I really had to learn to talk science, and he had to learn how to talk art, which was really neat. But it was about bringing the two disciplines together to speak about what they both could offer. So this spot in Grossmore, where I built the installation, is the internationally recognized boundary between two periods in geological time, between the Cambrian period and the Ordovician period. So it was one of those things where we dove into the research about the development of boundary stratotypes globally, and then took that research and went out onto the shoreline and actually found where they had determined that this boundary should be, and walked out on the wave cut platform that you see in the top image at low tide, and actually traced that bed in the limestone and shale out as far as we could go to the low tide point. So that was where I was going to build the installation. And then we spent about 3.5 weeks gathering the materials by hand up and down the shore. Each of those poles is between about 2 meters and 3 meters in height. And each of those is supported by cobbles that we found on the beaches and along the shoreline that we carried on our backs in backpacks, and built cairns at regular intervals out on that bed. So it was one of those situations where you have the opportunity to make work of a really sort of tremendous scale, but because it was in a national park, I had to be extremely careful about how I made the work that I made. I could leave, it was, take only pictures, leave no mark. So all of everything that went into the installation was found in that immediate area. The installation was 150 meters long. And it was built on the falling tide on a single half day by myself, my partner, and several volunteers from the area and from Parks Canada who wanted to be involved in the project. So we built it as the tide went out, and then watched the tide come in and take it all apart.
Wow.
So it lasted, I think the last of the poles actually came down about 48 hours later, just with the movement of the tide. So behind this and that idea of fixed points and boundaries in scientific discourse, I was also interested in the idea of just the way human beings are interested in laying claim to space.
Right.
It gets back to that relationship between identity and space and how we situate ourselves on the planet. So I started thinking about borders and limits and definition, and who has the right to define things, who has the right to say, yes, that is the Cambrian Ordovician boundary, yes, that is Range Road 263, yes, that is Township Road, right? The Dominion Land Survey, that this it was a way of bringing the prairie landscape that I grew up in, that I live in, to bear on a much larger scale of thinking. So who gets to decide what the borders are? How fixed are those borders? How do we, is that simply a means by which we seek permanence in a world that is never permanent? It's always in movement. It's always in transformation. And how does that fit into time? I'm sitting on a shore with rocks that are hundreds of millions of years old. And simultaneously, there's geological time all around me. There's a tide cycle. There's the passage of a single day from sunrise to sunset. There's the marked time of my own body, my own life. There's clock time. There, all of those things all at once. And we sort of, we want to cut them all up and make them manageable. So it was a way of talking about all of those things in a very simple way. So people could take what they want from it and run with it. I wanted to find a way to talk about all of those issues, all of those big ideas, those big philosophical questions, in a way that was still fairly accessible. So it was a really neat experience being out on the rocks all day, documenting this thing in video and photographs and time lapse, and at the same time talking to people about it. And it was amazing how people just got it. It's like, oh, yeah, time, right, rocks, time, splitting space. It was you could see the sort of a click, 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 click. It was a really, really lovely period of time to sit with that work, but also made it extremely challenging in terms of how to bring all of those ideas together without it being a complete disaster when I brought it to the gallery, which leads me to the next slide. So one of the best ways I found to actually look at ideas of time and process and change is video. And so this is an image from the Discovery Center Gallery. I was able to develop work from the initial project in 2014 and bring it back to the Discovery Center Gallery in 2016 for the duration of the 2016 park season, which was from May to October. So this video installation is about 20 feet long by about 7 feet high. It's over 14 panels. And I actually mapped the projections. There are 9 or 10 separate videos in this installation. And I mapped each of those videos to the individual panels. So it works sculpturally as well as a video. You can see how they're set at angles and in three-dimensional space. So it was a way of talking about that place and the space and how things get divided up all at the same time. And there was an audio component to this as well, which we're going to get to in just a second. But it was very much a new way of working. I had worked a bit in video, but I had never worked in mapping an installation of this scale before. So it was a challenge I set for myself. And it was really exciting and nerve-wracking and stressful to work on, but it was a lot of fun too. So this was a major component, but there were also TV works on the wall that I'll show in just a second that came out of this. So we're going to cross our fingers and hope this works, guys. I'm going to share my screen and show you guys a little clip from that installation. So I gotta go here. Am I screen sharing?
No.
Allow. Yes, you could see my screen.
There we go.
Okay, and we go off in we go. I know, it's pretty scary, isn't it? Okay, I am going to run this. I'm going to go big.
That is so neat.
Okay. Okay, there we go. And then I move this down and not share my screen anymore.
Nice.
Okay, we're back.
Fantastic. And now we're big.
Okay, great. Yay, it worked. Yay, I love it when technology works the way it's supposed to.
Right?
So that gives you an indication of what I was trying to capture, right? So there's that, the human making of a boundary. As part of the installation, as well as just the processes that were in the natural processes that were in play in different scales of time. So we can move to the next slide.
Okay.
And there we go. So this is another iteration of the exhibition. This was at the Art Gallery of St. Albert in St. Albert, Alberta in 2019. And so it was a reworking. I completely remapped the video to fit the space. So that was shown, as you can see, in those long vertical panels. So there's a lot of going up and going down and moving across as well. It was a different space to work in. I was also able to show, you can see in the middle there's the middle pair of images. On the right-hand side, you can see a shot of the time lapse of the actual creation and dissolution of the original installation. That was the first time I had been able to show that at scale for this project. So that was really nice. And I was able to dive back into the work that I had done in 2016 and create some new work. And so there were 4 new pieces, wall-based pieces that you see at the bottom that I created for the show. The other thing that was interesting is I revisited that idea of transparency and those hanging panels, and took a long shot photograph of the original installation down the line of poles, and then printed it very large on that transparent silk organza, and that was suspended sculpturally in the gallery, in the space, so that you could walk down the installation. So it was a way of bringing that experience into a gallery setting. So we'll just go quickly through a few of the works that came out of this. This is one. This is also available to Art Rental and Sales. This is a photograph. It's a 36 by 36 panel. The actual bed that I took it from, it's a huge cliff face, but the actual image itself, in real space on the cliff, is probably 12 by 12 inches. So it's this blowing up, this playing around with scale and with texture. And the other thing that I did when I printed this one and the next image that we're going to see is that I cut up the image so that it was printed in individual panels, to reiterate that idea, coming back to that prairie landscape that is informed my understanding of space, and talk sideways about borders and limits and containment and that push between the human desire to contain things and the natural world, which will not be contained. So, and we can go to the next one. So the previous image was an image of bedded slate. And the interesting thing about that cliff is that all the beds would have been laid down horizontally originally. But because of tectonic movement, flipping action and earthquakes and things like that, the beds have been tilted up. So that the cliff is actually past vertical now. And so what you see in outcrop has everything that was flat has now been flipped up. And so when the waves hit that on edge, it sort of breaks off in bits. So you get this layering in space of a history of deposition that goes back into time. So that idea of layering and memory comes back over and over and over again in my work. And this was one of the clearest examples of how that plays out in the natural world. And we can go to the next one. This one was brand new for 2019. And getting back to that idea of layering, I also wanted to really dig back into ways of understanding landscape. So the background to this piece is a gel transfer print of a topographical map of the area and the coastline. There's another, and these are all offset on at different heights on the panel. There's satellite imagery there from Google Earth and from iMaps. There's a photograph that I shot looking at the cliff from the wave cut platform at low tide. And that blue patch up in the upper left of your screen is actually an enlargement of a seismic profile that was shot in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, outside the park, that shows the reflectors of the layers of rock underneath what you see on the shore.
Cool.
So it's, yeah, so different ways of bringing together different kinds of information and different ways of seeing and knowing and different perspectives and all of it.
Yeah.
And we can go to the next slide. The thing that both my partner and I really wanted to do coming through this project was to write about it and to produce an artist book. And so fortunately for the 2019 exhibition, we were able to do just that. And we were able to get some funding from the Alberta Foundation of the Arts to support the publication of a limited edition book by Arts and Heritage St. Albert. So that book is available. There's 200 copies in the whole entire world. And it's printed in full color. It's an edition of 200 signed and numbered. And it includes photographs of the initial installation, some selected photographs from exhibition, an essay by me, an essay by my partner, Dr. John Waldron, and an essay from Melinda Pinfold, who is art historian and critic, who wanted to take on writing about the project and put her own spin on it. So it was a really wonderful way for me to bring back together my writing background and my literary background and my art practice. So it was a tremendous opportunity. So the next thing I'd like to talk about briefly is the latest project, which just closed, which is called Macromerial. And this was at Snap Gallery in Edmonton. And I'm going to share my screen again and just take you on a quick little journey through the exhibition so you can see what we were doing. I was very fortunate and I'm extremely honored to have as a friend and colleague composer and sound artist Scott Smallwood, who is my collaborator on Macromerial. And he's wonderful. He's wonderful. I learned so much about sound and about sound art from him and continue to do so. But Scott created 2 sound works for this exhibition. And we also had a live performance of a score that he wrote here in Edmonton. And it was also performed initially in Nova Scotia in 2017. So I'm going to do that crazy share your screen again thing. Here we go. Yes, I'm going to allow you to share my screen. And here we go, back off into infinity and beyond. All right.
Awesome. I'll just pop my video off so there's a little bit more room on the screen there for it, Sydney.
Okay. This runs a couple of minutes, so I'll just show this. Okay.
Thank you for sharing that. That was awesome.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you for watching.
Absolutely. Well, and it was so nice to see that exhibit at SNAP. They did such a wonderful job dealing with all of the COVID restrictions and everything. And
they were just went above and beyond it. They were so great.
Yeah.
So great. So several of the works that you see in that show, the large prints and the small work, are on their way to some have been dropped off, but they're on their way to art rental and sales. Yeah. So I will just go quickly through. Let's just go quickly through a few of the just scroll through the images so that folks can see them a little more closely, because it's hard to do. So yeah, go ahead. But this was a wonderful project, and again, it started with a resident. It was 2016 and 2017. Scott and I were out in Parsboro, Nova Scotia, working on the Bay of Fundy. This work has its roots in an exploration of the world's highest tides and what that means, and the history of shipbuilding on the shore and the history of fishing, but also the history of this is also the history of Mi'kma'ki, right? Is Mi'kmaq traditional land, traditional territory, and there's a lot of legends and stories, particularly Glooscap legends, around the Bay of Fundy and the formation of the Bay of Fundy and different things that happened there. So it was a way of weaving in all of those histories in making this work. And I felt very strongly in going back into this work for 2019 that I needed to acknowledge the Mi'kmaq heritage in the area. And so, although it's difficult to see in some of these shots, on the buoys that you saw in the windows, and in the flags in the windows, and also on one of the boats, the ribs of the big boat that were on the floor on the inside, are all there's a whole bunch of references to the Mi'kmaq places on that shore, some of the Glooscap legends, and the way they intersect with our current scientific understanding from a white Western perspective of the landscape and the bay, and why the bay does what it does. So that's an ongoing journey for me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wonderful. And we have a couple minutes left, so if folks want to ask Sydney any questions, now is your time. I have a question for you, Sydney.
Okay.
How did you get those pieces of boat back to Edmonton, Alberta?
Well,
I feel like there's a fun answer.
The first challenge was actually scrounging them, and they were scrounged off beaches.
Yeah.
Offshore lines, abandoned boats. The big boat, that big blue boat stem and the big long ribs. A friend and I actually took apart a derelict boat with a chainsaw and a pry bar, and brought it back to the studio that I had for the residency. The short story is that we exhibited the work, and in Nova Scotia at Main Station, where we had the residency. And then I packed it all up and boxed it all up and shipped it back on with a commercial shipper back to Edmonton, and stored it, and then brought it out again and started reworking with all of that. The buoys were sent in large tubs, Rubbermaid tubs, by Canada Post.
Yeah.
And then I brought them back and did the collage work here. It must be noted too that those buoys, a great many of them were gathered by hand off the beaches. That's garbage.
Right. Wow.
Right. So there's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
that comes into play with this work. It's about how we understand our relationship to the sea, how we understand our relationship to that bay, the life in it, and how it can both sustain us and how we can damage it. Yeah. You know, I mean, there are, you know, whales and dolphins and fish that get trapped in this stuff, and it's, yeah. So it's kind of a coming full circle back to the found object stuff that I was doing when I first started my full-time practice, but with a slightly different intentionality. Yeah, it's still about those gaps, the gaps in the story. It's also about gaps in understanding our impact on the planet and how we need to care for our place in the world and the world in general and our relationships. It's about having a conversation with each other and with the planet. I think that's probably the shortest way I could describe why I work. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we have some wonderful messages in the chat from some folks who just absolutely enjoyed all of your exhibits. And thank you so much, everyone, for letting us know. That's so sweet. We really appreciate
that's lovely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it is. I completely agree with you, Anna. It is very interesting to hear the insights of Sydney, and seeing the exhibit firsthand at SNAP was wonderful. And we actually got to have a little bit of a tour with her, and it was so interesting to hear all of the nuances and to hear from her directly. So yeah, I'm so glad that we got to have you here with us tonight, Sydney. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It was lovely to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. If you have any questions about the artwork that we have at Art Rental and Sales of Sydney's, I would be happy to answer. Like we mentioned earlier, these pieces here have just arrived, and they will be a part of our Bring It Home event this year. So if you want to see those in person, please pop by the gallery. And these ones here, just a second. Almost there. These ones are pending a sale, which is very exciting because they just arrived.
That's amazing.
So if you want to snatch up some of Sydney's work, get it while it's still here and available.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, also, I realize I have blathered on tremendously long, and I apologize for that for those of you who needed to go or are getting bored stiff. But if you do actually have questions that you want to ask me about my practice or about my work, anything like that, if you go to my website, there is a contact form, and I do actually reply to my messages. So feel free to get in touch. I enjoy part of why I do what I do is to connect with people. So the door's always open to conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again so much, Sydney, for joining us this evening, and thank you all so much for attending. We really appreciate it, and we wish you all the very best.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody for coming tonight. Thanks so much, Sarah. Thanks to the AGA.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.